everyone. Welcome back to So Wizard Podcast rundown of AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies, 10th Anniversary Edition. Before we get started, please remember to subscribe to our channel. Really helps us grow our audience. If you're seeing this on Patreon, thank you so much for your report. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching this, and if you would like to get these videos a week early, check us out on Patreon. Tiers start as low as $1 a month, and you get other multiple monthly bonus content for it. Number 85 on the list is 1935's A Night at the Opera. This is a Marx Brothers classic, and was actually my first Marx Brothers movie. I had seen clips, and of course I was familiar with them in broad strokes, but this was the first time that I sat down specifically to watch one of their movies in its entirety. And it's not a bad place to start, since Groucho Marx has said that this is his favorite of all their movies. The Marx Brothers come together as show business adjacents working in the world of stage operas, and among the cast is Rosa, played by Kitty Carlisle, a leading woman who's in love with a tenor singer, Ricardo. Ricardo's played by Alan Jones. Now, Jones's character just can't seem to get his due, and somehow because of that, the two of them can't be together. Stuck between the two is the current lead tenor, Rodolfo. Rodolfo is played by Walter King. Rodolfo's pompous and very forward with Rosa. So the Marx Brothers, through a series of mishaps and sharp-witted antics, remove Rodolfo so Ricardo can get his big break as a singer, but also so he and Rosa can be together. I'm sorry if that plot synopsis sounded more textbook or a little stilted than usual. I do try to do these off the top in my own words and not really go to any resources for what the movie was about. But with such a simple plot, I did have to read a few other synopses to put mine together because it feels less like a narrative and a plot than a sketch comedy movie where the plot is just kind of there to loosely string together the bits. So the plot is there, it is cohesive, you can follow the story, the three-act structure, all that usual stuff, and it's not even hard to follow, but it's second place to the bigger bits of the trademark Marx Brothers comedy. Now, tying the bits together with the story, it works well enough. We've all seen it many times. People do it over and over and over for these kind of comedy movies. And people aren't showing up to see a Marx Brothers movie where the love story between two singers who aren't either aren't the Marx Brothers is resolved properly. Now, I'm sure that was necessary Hollywood spin in the day, and entertainment was way different, as clearly indicated by the operatic parts of the movie. Speaking of the operatic parts of the movie, I found them incredibly grating. I've never been very into opera, or at all, or musicals in general, but there are many things that I'm not into that make great movies. In this case, though, the opera parts of the story felt like interruptions from the Marx Brothers comedy, almost like two different movies were just cut together. And because of the old audio quality, it's awful. I mean, sorry, but it is. It's understandable given the age, but combining that with the shrill singing in a format that I already don't care for, it made all those scenes just pierce into my skull. So, taking the music aspect out of it, which I know is a silly statement in a movie called A Night at the Opera, the Marx Brothers comedy is the relatively timeless mayhem you'd expect. I was pleased with how sharp and contemporary feeling a lot of it still felt. I also liked how each of the three Marx Brothers had their own take on the comedy for this movie. Being my first one, I'm not sure if this is their usual give and take. Groucho, who's arguably the most famous and definitely my personal favorite based on this movie, has sharp wit and a carefree attitude regardless of the situation. Groucho slings one-liners and snappy comebacks, and some of his jabs can be downright cutting, and he doesn't fall into profanity, which makes the writing that much wittier. Groucho also managed to do all of this, at least in this particular movie, with a sense of class about him. The movie was made to take shots at high society, after all, so that may have had something to do with it, but based on my limited exposure, I would guess this is kind of Groucho's normal thing. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Harpo Marx, where he picks up the role of the physical comedy. It's 100% clear that every slapstick and physical comedian to follow right up into present day draws inspiration directly from the Harpo template. The physicality of his performance is heightened since he never utters a single word of dialogue. It is all physical expression and reactions. Harpo got a lot of his stylings from even older comedic forms, the stage and vaudeville of course, but he definitely put his stamp on this stuff and made it his own. Unfortunately, even in a 96-minute movie, a lot of his scenes run long. And the third Marx Brother movie, Chico Marx, falls somewhere in between. He isn't the purely physical comedy, but he also isn't the sophisticated, sharp-tongued, gentleman, for lack of a better word. He reminds me a lot more of the Three Stooges. So, if you know the Marx Brothers at all, you'll realize I only covered 3 of them. This is the first Marx Brothers movie that Zeppo wasn't a part of. While researching the history of this movie, I was delighted to find that the Marx Brothers seemed just as funny off-screen as on. I came across countless stories of them with the cameras off being just as hilarious as their on-screen personas. Irving Thalberg, producer of the movie, didn't seem to get he was making a comedy. The movie was signed off on and underway when he learned that Zeppo wasn't going to be part of it. Thalberg wanted to pay the Marx Brothers less than their usual fee since he felt he was being shorted by only getting 3 out of the 4. Groucho, just as witty as his on-screen counterparts, immediately replied that without Zeppo, they were worth twice as much. Thalberg also had a reputation for being rude and was known for disrespecting the talent in his studio. He would routinely keep people waiting for hours or not show up to meetings at all. He tried to pull us with the Marx Brothers one time too many. In one instance, they were waiting for hours in the secretary's office, and Thalberg's secretary went home for the day. They waited so long. The bros had enough of Thalberg and pushed all the filing cabinets in the office against his door and then took off, trapping the guy inside. From that moment forward, Thalberg didn't keep them waiting for hours on end while he was just sitting in his office attending to other matters. But he didn't fully learn his lesson. He had another habit where he would bail on meetings before they were done to do whatever he wanted or attend other meetings or who knows what. In one of these instances, the Marx Brothers decided to strip completely naked and cook potatoes in the fireplace in his office. Crazy bizarre, but pretty funny. He came back to find them in this state, and he decided to join them for a baked potato, and he finally got the hint, and he treated them and their meetings with the respect and importance they deserved. There are countless other stories, but I love these hilarious examples of biting the hand that feeds. If you look into this movie, you'll notice that the runtime of the versions you can buy, rent, or stream right now is different than the original release. The movie was made before World War II. When the war broke out, the whole world changed, especially the US's relationship to large parts of Europe. The very beginning of this movie takes place in Milan, Italy, and after the opening credits, as it exists now, we're thrust right in the middle of a scene. I thought the jarring intro was just early Hollywood not quite having pacing down or editing smoothed out to perfection, and I didn't mind it so much since we got right into Groucho running his mouth. But it turns out that there was an earlier scene before this one that gave you the establishing shot, gave you Milan, Italy, and even had a musical number. While I'm not really that upset about the cutting of a musical number when I didn't like the musical numbers in the movie anyway, it is a shame that the movie was edited over politics. Even more so since the actual negatives were cut so that restoring that original scene is impossible. If you didn't catch A Night at the Opera in its initial run, you'll never see the missing 3 to 5 minutes. A Night at the Opera had an estimated budget of around $1 million. That's massive for the 1930s. Think about the state of the country at the time. The Great Depression had just ended when this movie was coming out, and most people were still recovering from its massive widespread effects. As with our current tough time, though not nearly as bad as the Great Depression, we're all finding some solace in the escapism of movies. Despite the financial hardships many citizens were facing, A Night at the Opera would go on to earn nearly $4 million. That's around $76 million in today's money adjusted for inflation, which is not a bad turnaround. Movie awards in 1935 seemed to be non-existent, or nearly. I really couldn't find a lot of information on it. The only award information I could find was from 1993 when A Night at the Opera was welcomed into the National Film Registry. It was fun diving back into the history of the silver screen, and also comedy in general. It's impossible now to watch anything comedic without thinking about the groundwork that was laid in this era. It's astonishing how close the parallels run. Watching a comedy from even 10 years ago has such a different vibe than one released today. Now, you're not going to be rolling on the floor with a comedy of this nature. It's not really into modern sensibilities, but A Night at the Opera should be seen for the film education aspect alone. The Marx Brothers make the 8-decade-old movie feel contemporary and as timeless as a movie can be. Thanks for watching. Be sure to come back next week for number 84, Easy Rider from 1969. Remember, these AFI countdown videos hit a week early for our patrons on Patreon. Tiers start at only $1 a month, and you get multiple monthly bonus shows for it, with more coming next month. Be sure to listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. SubWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments or leave something on social media. All of our accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. Thanks again.